When we talk about problems, most people don't realize how much of their exhaustion comes from the habit of sharing their struggles with everyone except the one who can actually change the situation. There is a kind of heaviness that grows inside a person when their first instinct is to run to people, to complain, to seek validation, to unload their emotions on someone who is just as powerless, just as limited, just as incapable as they are, and then they wonder why nothing changes. They wonder why the heart still feels tight, why the chest still feels heavy, why the mind still feels crowded. But the truth is simple. The more you speak to creation, the more confused you become. The more you speak to the Creator, the more clarity you gain. There's a deep difference between telling someone about your day and placing your pain before them as if they are the solution. People can listen, but they cannot fix the decree written for you. They can sympathize, but they cannot alter a single moment of your future. They can wipe your tears, but they cannot prevent the next one from falling. So when you rely on people the way only Allah should be relied upon, you set yourself up for disappointment. You build expectations that collapse every time reality strikes, and slowly your heart becomes dependent on temporary comforts instead of eternal ones. When you turn to Allah, something different happens. You don't just speak, you release. You don't just express, you surrender. You don't just describe your pain, you hand it over. The moment you raise your hands, the moment a whisper escapes your lips, the moment your heart breaks in front of Him and only Him, you enter a space where solutions begin before you even finish. Dua, because Allah doesn't wait for eloquence. He doesn't wait for perfect sentences. He doesn't wait for you to know how to ask. He waits for sincerity, for a heart that trusts Him more than it trusts anyone else. People often say, "I'm tired." But they're not tired from life. They're tired from carrying what was never meant to be carried alone. When you keep unloading your burdens onto people, you drain yourself because they have no place to put what you give them. But when you unload onto Allah, He takes your burden and replaces it with calmness. That's why the heart feels lighter after real dua. Not because the problem disappears, but because it is no longer yours to worry about. Think about how many times you've told someone your struggles only to feel worse afterwards. Maybe they judged you, maybe they misunderstood, maybe they didn't care, maybe they responded in a way that made you feel even more alone. But now think of a moment when you spoke to Allah privately, quietly, with sincerity. You weren't embarrassed. You weren't afraid. You didn't have to choose your words carefully. You didn't have to worry about being misunderstood. You simply spoke, and your heart softened because the one who heard you understood not just what you said, but everything you couldn't say. There is a profound power in keeping your private pain between you and Allah. It builds your discipline, your resilience, your emotional strength. It teaches you reliance in its purest form. When you tell people your problems, you scatter your energy. When you tell Allah your problems, you gather your strength. When you complain to people, the problem grows. When you complain to Allah, the solution begins. The moment you learn to sit alone with your heart and whisper your struggles to Allah, you begin to develop a kind of inner peace no one can disturb. You no longer need constant reassurance from people, because you've found reassurance in the one who controls every moment of ease and every moment of difficulty. You no longer chase understanding from people who barely understand themselves. You no longer depend on temporary emotional bandages. Instead, you anchor your soul in the one who heals in ways the world cannot comprehend. Some people worry that if they don't talk to others about their problems, they'll collapse under the weight. But the reality is that you collapse because you haven't built the habit of turning to Allah first. Once you begin to do that consistently, your emotional foundation becomes unshakable. People's opinions lose their power. Their reactions lose their influence. Their validation becomes irrelevant. Because when you speak to Allah regularly, your heart is constantly being refined, strengthened, and protected. And when you finally learn to trust Him more than anyone, something beautiful happens. You stop seeking pity. You stop explaining yourself. You stop trying to justify your pain. You stop running behind people who don't value your emotions. Instead, you handle your storms with dignity, knowing that Allah sees every tear before it falls. hears every thought before it forms, and responds to every silence before it becomes a prayer. There is so much peace hidden in private conversations with Allah. You can cry in sujud without shame. You can admit your weakness without fear. You can confess your mistakes without judgment. You can reveal your deepest fears without hesitation. And you can ask for things that you're too embarrassed to ask from anyone else. This is why the hearts of those who make dua regularly feel lighter, calmer, and more stable. They've learned that silence before people and sincerity before Allah is a doorway to tranquility. And that's why the first transformation in your life begins when you stop complaining to people about what hurts you and start telling Allah instead. Because when you speak to Him, you're not just expressing pain, you're strengthening faith. You're not just sharing feelings, you're building reliance. You're not just venting emotions, you're shaping your inner discipline. You're not tired from life, you're tired from misplacing your trust. Once you place it back where it belongs, everything changes. That is where true strength begins. When a person says they are tired, usually they don't mean physical tiredness. The body can be exhausted and still recover with a few hours of rest. But when the heart is exhausted, when the soul is drained, when the mind feels heavy even after sleep, that is not physical fatigue anymore. That is a sign that the heart has drifted from the one who gives strength, and the soul is starving for the connection it was created to depend on. Emotional exhaustion is the kind that sleep cannot fix, food cannot fix, entertainment cannot fix, and people definitely cannot fix. The only cure for that exhaustion is returning to Allah, because the heart has only one true place where it finds rest. There is a moment every person experiences when life feels overwhelming, not because the responsibilities are too many, but because the heart is too empty. That emptiness comes from neglecting the very source of strength that was meant to keep us upright. You can push through long days, stressful schedules, difficult situations if the heart is anchored properly. But when you allow distance to grow between you and Allah, even the smallest tasks feel like burdens. Even the simplest decisions feel heavy. Even normal life feels tiring, not because you're weak, but because you're disconnected. You have to understand that discipline is not just waking up early, working hard, or managing time. Discipline starts inside with the heart. When the heart is close to Allah, discipline becomes natural. You feel motivated even without external encouragement. You feel focused even without someone pushing you. You feel driven even when no one is watching. But when the heart drifts away, when dua becomes rare, when dhikr becomes occasional, when prayers are rushed, the soul begins to lose its strength. And without inner strength, no external habit can survive. You think you're tired, but you're actually spiritually undernourished. When a person stops making dua, stops turning to Allah with real sincerity, something shifts inside them. Anxiety grows, frustration grows, impatience grows. Life begins to feel like a weight instead of a journey. Even blessings lose their sweetness because the heart is no longer connected to the one who gave them. You might think you're burned out from responsibilities, but sometimes you're burned out from ignoring your own spiritual needs. The soul needs its share, and when you neglect it long enough, it demands its rights through emotional exhaustion. And the strange part is that people keep searching for strength everywhere except the one place they'll actually find it. They talk to friends hoping to feel lighter, they distract themselves hoping to feel better, they scroll endlessly hoping to silence their thoughts. But none of this cures the root cause, because the exhaustion is not coming from the outside world, it's coming from inside the heart. And when the heart loses its anchor, even comfort feels uncomfortable. There is a different kind of energy that rises inside a person when they reconnect with Allah. It's not the energy of caffeine or sleep or motivation videos. It's a quiet, deep, stable strength that doesn't fade when life gets hard. It's the strength that comes from knowing that Allah is carrying what you cannot. It's the strength that comes from knowing your prayers are being heard, your tears are being counted, your struggles are being seen. When a person remembers this, their exhaustion transforms into clarity and their fear turns into reliance. The truth is most people are not tired because they are overworked. They are tired because their hearts are overloaded. They are tired because they carry their problems alone. They are tired because they rely too much on people and too little on Allah. They are tired because they try to solve everything with their own limited strength, instead of leaning on the unlimited strength that Allah offers. And when you live like that long enough, life becomes heavier than it needs to be. There is a moment in life when a person sits quietly, maybe late at night, maybe early in the morning, maybe in the car, maybe after a long day, and they feel something inside them breaking. That breaking is not weakness. That breaking is a reminder that the heart was never designed to function without its creator. A reminder that the soul does not get tired of tasks, it gets tired of distance. A reminder that peace is not found when problems disappear, but when Allah becomes the one you turn to before everything else. When you begin reconnecting, even a little bit, things start to shift. When you make dua with sincerity, even if it's just a few words, your heart begins to feel alive again. When you pray with real presence, even a single prayer, your soul begins to regain strength. When you remember Allah during the day, even briefly, your mind begins to feel lighter. These small acts create a powerful inner discipline, a spiritual rhythm that pulls you out of emotional exhaustion and into emotional stability. And suddenly, you realize that the tiredness you thought was physical was actually spiritual. You realize that you weren't lacking energy, you were lacking connection. You realize that your heart wasn't weary from work, it was weary from forgetfulness. And the deeper your connection grows, the deeper your strength becomes. The more you remember Allah, the less life drains you. The more you rely on Him, the more disciplined you become in everything else. The more you keep your heart close to Him, the less tired you feel, even when life remains difficult. Nothing drains a person more than carrying their struggles without Allah, and nothing energizes a person more than handing those struggles back to Him. Because once you reconnect, once you turn back sincerely, once you make your heart depend on Allah again, even the hardest days feel manageable and even the biggest problems feel small. That is where true peace begins. When a person keeps saying they are tired, often they don't realize that the exhaustion they're feeling isn't coming from the weight of life, but from the way they approach life. You're not tired because the journey is too difficult. You're tired because you haven't disciplined your heart to turn to Allah before turning to anyone or anything else. The soul becomes weary when it wakes up without purpose, lives without direction, and sleeps without reflection. It's not the tasks that drain you. It's the disconnection from the one who strengthens you for those tasks. When you begin your day with everything except Allah, you begin your day already empty. When you end your day without returning to Him, you end your day still burdened. And then you wonder why life feels heavy, but heaviness is what happens when you carry what Allah asked you to hand over. Discipline begins with intention. It begins with the first thought of the day, the first step you take in the morning, the first thing your heart seeks. If that first step is focused on the world, your day becomes scattered. If it is focused on people, your day becomes shaped by their opinions. If it is focused on your worries, your day becomes shaped by fear. But if that first step is towards Allah, even if it's small, even if it's weak, even if it's just a whispered dua, then your day becomes built on strength. The heart suddenly has a direction, and discipline doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like clarity. Most people don't lack motivation, they lack spiritual grounding. Without grounding, the soul becomes unstable. You can try to organize your schedule, build new habits, watch motivational videos, set goals, but nothing lasts because the heart itself is unsettled. It's like trying to build a house on soft sand. No matter how good the design is, it will collapse. Discipline requires stability, and stability comes from the heart being connected to Allah. That connection is what gives you the ability to be consistent, to push through difficulty, to stay committed when the world distracts you. When you make Allah your priority, discipline becomes easier, not harder. You start to wake up with purpose because you know your day isn't just about task. It's about fulfilling a trust, a responsibility, a journey towards Allah. You start to control your emotions because you know anger, frustration, and sadness are not meant to rule you when you have a Lord who listens to your every whisper. You start to value your time because you understand that every moment is a gift and a test. You begin to see that life is not happening to you. It's happening for you, guiding you, shaping you, teaching you. Every struggle becomes an invitation to return to Allah. But when Allah is not the first place you turn, everything becomes more difficult than it needs to be. You become overwhelmed by small problems. You become sensitive to small comments. You become stressed by small uncertainties. You become drained by small disappointments. This isn't because you're weak. It's because you're trying to navigate life without the one who created it. You're relying on your own strength, and your strength is limited. You're relying on people, and people are flawed. You're relying on outcomes, and outcomes are uncertain. But when you rely on Allah, you rely on the one who never weakens, never fails, never disappears, and never disappoints. The heart becomes disciplined when it learns to pause before reacting, to breathe before stressing, to reflect before complaining, and to turn to Allah before turning to anyone else. That pause is powerful. It transforms your entire emotional experience. Instead of letting life control you, you begin to control how you respond to life. Instead of letting fear dictate your decisions, you let trust shape them. Instead of letting stress consume your mind, you let dua soothe it. These inner habits create resilience, and resilience is the foundation of discipline. It's surprising how much strength a person gains simply by making dua consistently. Dua is not a small act. It is discipline disguised as devotion. When you raise your hands, you're training your soul to depend on Allah, not on itself. When you speak to Him, you're training your heart to express what it truly feels instead of hiding behind distractions. When you trust that your prayers are heard, you're training your mind to let go of what it cannot control. This is the discipline that reshapes your entire life from the inside out. You're not tired. You're tired of trying to survive without discipline. And discipline is not harshness, it is alignment. When your heart aligns with Allah, everything else aligns naturally. Your schedule aligns, your emotions align, your goals align, your relationships align, your priorities align. Suddenly, you find yourself becoming consistent in prayer, not because you forced yourself, but because your soul yearns for it. You find yourself avoiding sins, not because you're perfect, but because your heart feels uncomfortable without Allah. You find yourself speaking less, complaining less, worrying less, because your trust has shifted from people to the one who controls every outcome. And this is why the statement "you're not tired, you're undisciplined" carries so much truth. The exhaustion you feel is not from the weight of life, but from the absence of structure in your heart. When you discipline yourself to turn to Allah first, you build an internal system where emotions don't overpower you, where problems don't break you, where setbacks don't paralyze you. You develop the kind of strength that cannot be shaken by people's words or life's uncertainties. Imagine for a moment waking up, and the first thought that crosses your mind is not your worries, not your responsibilities, not your phone, but Allah. Imagine the peace of starting the day with gratitude, with dua, with a heart that feels guided instead of lost. Imagine facing difficulties with the certainty that Allah is with you. Imagine sleeping with a heart free from the burdens you carried during the day. This is the transformation discipline brings, and it's not about perfection, it's about consistency. It's about choosing Allah again and again, even when life tries to distract you. It's about making your heart return, even when it wanders. It's about reminding yourself that strength doesn't come from avoiding problems, but from facing them with Allah beside you. Once you build this discipline, you begin to notice something remarkable. You don't feel tired the same way anymore. Challenges don't exhaust you, they refine you. Responsibilities don't drain you, they elevate you. Hard days don't break you, they strengthen you. Because now you're not carrying life alone. Now your heart has direction. Now your soul has purpose. Now your strength has a source that never runs out. That is where true empowerment begins. There is a kind of strength that cannot be measured by how much you lift, how much you endure, or how much you achieve. It's a strength that forms quietly, silently, in the privacy of your heart when you choose to speak to Allah instead of exposing your struggles to the world. Most people don't realize how much inner power they lose every time they turn their pain into public conversation. They empty themselves before people who cannot fill them. They expose wounds to people who cannot heal them. They hand their vulnerabilities to hands that may not protect them. And then they wonder why they feel weak, misunderstood, or even embarrassed afterward. But the truth is simple. When you make people the audience of your pain, you give them power over your heart. When you make Allah the witness of your pain, you gain power over yourself. There is something deeply dignified about the person who keeps their struggles between themselves and Allah. They walk with a quiet resilience, a calmness that doesn't come from pretending everything is okay, but from knowing that Allah is handling what they cannot handle. Their strength isn't loud, it isn't dramatic, it isn't dependent on sympathy. It comes from sujud, from whispered du'as at night, from tears shed where no one else can see. And that kind of strength cannot be shaken, because it's built on a foundation that belongs only to Allah. When you complain to people, even if they care, they can only respond from their limited understanding. But when you complain to Allah, He responds with His unlimited mercy. People hear your words, Allah hears your heart. People hear your tone, Allah hears your pain. People hear the surface of what you say. Allah knows the layers beneath it. When you tell people your problems, you are seeking a human reaction. When you tell Allah your problems, you are seeking a divine solution. And solutions come only from Him. Many times when you share your struggles publicly, you don't realize that you're weakening your own emotional foundation. Because you begin depending on people's reactions, their comfort, their advice, their approval. You begin expecting them to understand you, to support you, to validate you. And when they don't respond the way you hoped, you feel even more drained than before. But when you share your struggles privately with Allah, you avoid this emotional collapse. You avoid disappointment, you avoid misunderstanding, you avoid the pain that comes from placing your heart in the hands of people who were never meant to carry it. The strongest people are not those who never cry. They are the ones who cry where their tears are safest, in front of Allah. They let their hearts break in sujud, not in front of the world. They let their fears spill in dua, not in public gatherings. They let their weakness show in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. And because of that, they rise in front of people with a strength that seems unexplainable. They rise calm, steady, composed, not because their life is easy, but because their heart has a place to rest. You see, when you make people your place of escape, you train your heart to depend on them. But when you make Allah your place of escape, you train your heart to depend on the one who never changes. And that kind of dependence builds inner strength. It teaches you to hold your emotions with maturity. It teaches you to face your hardships with dignity. It teaches you to walk through life with a sense of stability that other people simply cannot influence. Some people believe that speaking about their problems openly will make them feel lighter, but often it does the opposite. You expose your vulnerabilities to people who may use them against you, or misinterpret them, or gossip about them. Even if they're good, they can still change their perception of you, but Allah never changes His perception of you. He does not judge you when you break. He does not shame you when you struggle. He does not expose you when you fall. Instead, He covers you, comforts you, guides you, and strengthens you, quietly, gently, lovingly. When you guard your emotions from the world and give them only to Allah, you gain an inner discipline that becomes unshakable. You stop reacting emotionally to every situation because you've learned how to process your emotions with Allah before facing the world. You stop feeling desperate for people to understand you because you've already been understood by the one who created you. You stop feeling the need to explain every feeling because Allah has already heard the explanation your heart couldn't put into words. And then something remarkable happens. You begin to walk through life with a different kind of confidence. Not arrogance, not hardness, but a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're protected, you're supported. You're heard, you're held, This quiet confidence is the strongest shield a person can carry. It protects them from the opinions of others, from the emotional chaos of life, from the instability of the world. It gives them the ability to remain calm in storms, patient in trials, graceful in difficulties, because their heart is not scattered among people, it is anchored with Allah. And that's why public complaining often destroys a person's strength. It makes them emotionally dependent, externally focused, and internally fragile. But private dua builds strength because it makes you independent of people, focused on Allah, and internally strong. It teaches you to rely on the unseen more than the seen. It teaches you to trust in the plan more than the moment. It teaches you to face life with courage even when you feel vulnerable. Every time you choose silence before people and sincerity before Allah, your heart becomes stronger. Every time you swallow your frustration in public and release it in dua, you build discipline. Every time you choose dignity over drama, patience over pressure, trust over panic, your soul grows. And with every moment of private vulnerability, you gain public strength. This is the secret that many don't understand. The world sees calmness, but they don't see the sujud that built it. They see resilience, but they don't see the tears that shaped it. They see discipline, but they don't see the late night whispers that nourished it. They see strength, but they don't see the brokenness that was healed in private. And that is where the deepest kind of strength begins.